Never keep over this amount in your bank. What if I told you that having too much money in your bank account is actually making you poorer? I know that sounds crazy, but stick with me here. Most people think a fat bank balance means they're doing well financially, that it's responsible, safe, smart. But here's the brutal truth. If you're stacking too much cash, you're actually slowing down your progress toward real wealth. And it's costing you thousands of dollars every single year. According to CNBC, 82% of Americans don't keep their cash in high-yield savings accounts, and 57% just let it sit in traditional savings, earning practically nothing. Meanwhile, inflation is eating 3 to 4% annually, and opportunity costs are piling up faster than most people realize. Look, cash management is one of those rarely talked about skills in personal finance, but it separates people who build wealth from people who just store money that's slowly dying. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why keeping too much cash is one of the costliest mistakes you can make. And more importantly, I'll tell you the exact amount you should actually keep. Drop a comment right now, cash trap, if you're ready to find out. Let's start with the first reason that a comfortable cushion is quietly destroying your financial future. Number 1. The spending temptation trap. Let me tell you the first reason why that comfortable cash cushion is quietly destroying your financial future. And this one's going to hit close to home for a lot of you. When you have $30,000 sitting in your checking account and you only spend about $2,500 a month, here's what happens. That extra money becomes a silent permission slip to spend more. You're out shopping, you see a nice pair of shoes, maybe a designer bag, or even just a fancy phone case. You don't actually need it, but your brain does this quick calculation. I have $30,000 in my account. I can afford this. And just like that, you buy it. Now you might be thinking, come on, that's not me. I have self-control. But here's the thing. This isn't just my opinion. There was actually a study conducted back in 2010 called Spending on the Fly, where researchers analyzed 400 shoppers from 2 grocery stores, and they found a clear pattern. People with higher account balances and a bigger financial cushion spent more freely. What this means is simple but brutal. When people saw higher numbers in their bank accounts, they perceived they had more room to spend when shopping for groceries, and they consistently ended up overspending. It wasn't conscious. It wasn't reckless. It was just human psychology working against their financial goals. If you're the type of person who runs your entire life from one account, your emergency fund, your house savings, your car fund, all lumped together, this gets really dangerous, because that big balance number tricks your brain into thinking you can spend more than you should. But in reality, you're quietly dipping into your emergency fund reserves without even realizing it. But that's just the obvious part. What I'm about to say is what makes the difference between people who build wealth and people who just store cash. There's an ancient biblical parable about a rich fool that perfectly illustrates this trap. The man had abundant crops, so much that his barns couldn't hold it all. So he said to himself, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll store all my grain and goods there. And I'll say to my soul, you have plenty laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. But that very night, God called him a fool, because all that visible abundance made him feel invincible, and it led straight to complacency and poor decisions. Your $30,000 checking balance is like those bigger barns. Every time you see that number, your brain whispers, I'm doing well, I've earned this, I deserve a little splurge. But you're not building wealth, you're just storing it in a place where it invites spending. Here's your actionable solution, and you can implement this today. Separate your money into different accounts with specific purposes. Open one high-yield savings account for your emergency fund, money you literally never touch unless it's a real emergency. Open another one for your house down payment, maybe a third for your car fund. Keep only 1 month of expenses in your checking account, just enough to cover your bills and daily spending. That's it. When you check your balance and see $2,500 instead of $30,000, suddenly that impulse purchase doesn't feel so affordable anymore. Here's a quick story that brings this home. I know a woman who kept $40,000 in her checking account. She constantly overspent on small things: $80 dinners, $200 shopping trips, $150 subscriptions she forgot about. She thought she was fine because the balance stayed high. Then she separated everything into 3 labeled accounts: emergency, house, and monthly expenses. Within 6 months, she had saved more money than in the previous 2 years combined. Why? Because she couldn't see that big tempting number anymore. What was out of sight became out of mind. What she separated, she protected. The principle here is powerful. Out of sight, out of mind works for wealth building. What you can't see in your checking account, you can't impulsively spend. What you separate into specific buckets, you naturally protect for their intended purpose. Wait, there's something you need to pay attention to if you don't want to keep sabotaging your own financial goals. Number 2, your cash isn't working for you. Opportunity cost. The second reason, keeping too much cash is a massive mistake, and this one costs people hundreds of thousands of dollars over their lifetime, is that your cash is not working for you. It's just sitting there, doing absolutely nothing, while you're out working hard every single day. Look, I made this exact mistake in my early 20s. I kept all my money in a checking account, earning basically zero interest because I didn't realize there was this thing called investing. And when your money sits in a traditional bank account, paying you 0.01% interest, it means 2 devastating things. Number 1, your cash is completely idle, and number 2, you're incurring a massive opportunity cost that compounds over time. Let me tell you a real story that perfectly illustrates how expensive this mistake can be. I have a friend who's an incredibly successful YouTuber. I won't name him, but he makes around $20,000 a month, sometimes even more. About a year and a half ago, he confided in me that he was terrified to invest. He just couldn't get over the mental hurdle of putting his money into the market. So what was he doing instead? Stacking up cash in his bank account. And here's the crazy part. He actually watches all of our personal finance videos. He knows all the data, he understands the math. But fear kept him paralyzed. In October 2024, I asked him if he'd invested any of his money yet. He told me he was still waiting because he thought the market had topped out. At that time, he had $80,000 in cash just sitting there, earning nothing, waiting for the perfect moment to invest. And what I'm about to say is what makes the difference between people who build wealth and people who watch opportunities slip away. He never invested that money. The S&P 500 on October 9, 2024 was trading at 5,792. About a year later, it hit 6,700. That's a 15.6% gain that he completely missed out on because he was too afraid to put his money to work. On $80,000, that's $12,480 in foregone gains, just evaporated because of fear and inaction. Eventually, about 3 months ago, he got so frustrated with himself that he hired a money manager. Now he's paying a 1% annual fee just to have someone else invest for him because he couldn't overcome his own mental barriers. But honestly, for him, that's probably the only solution. Otherwise, that money would still be sitting there, dying slowly. There's an ancient parable that speaks directly to this. In the biblical story of the talents, a master gave 3 servants money to manage while he traveled. 2 servants invested their portions and doubled them, but the 3rd servant buried his money in the ground to keep it safe. When the master returned, he was absolutely furious with that 3rd servant. He said, "You wicked, lazy servant, you should have at least put my money with the bankers so it would earn interest." Think about that. Even 2,000 years ago, people understood that keeping money idle wasn't cautious. It was lazy. The wealthy understand this instinctively. They don't see cash as security. They see it as a tool that's either working or wasting. They're always asking themselves, how can my dollar right here generate more dollars in the future? Meanwhile, People who stay broke ask, how can I keep my dollar safe? Here's your actionable step, and this is critical. Calculate your true emergency fund need right now. Take your monthly essential expenses, rent or mortgage, basic groceries, utilities, minimum debt payments, and multiply by 3 to 6 months. That's your emergency fund. Everything above that amount, it should be invested, not sitting in a checking account earning nothing while inflation eats it alive. Here's a story that hammers this home. I know a man who kept $100,000 in a savings account for 5 years because it made him feel secure. Then one day, he actually calculated what he'd lost. Between missed market gains that averaged 10% annually and inflation eating 3% per year, he realized he'd lost roughly $45,000 in opportunity cost. $45,000 gone because he was too afraid to put his money to work. He told me, I thought I was protecting my family's future. I was actually stealing from it. The principle is harsh but true. Idle money isn't safe money, it's dying money. You need to make your dollars work as hard as you do, or watch them slowly disappear to inflation and missed opportunity. And what I'm about to say next is going to challenge everything you think you know about financial security. Number 3, the illusion of needing more cash. The third reason keeping too much cash is destroying your wealth is something I call the excess cash illusion. And this one's rooted deep in psychology and fear. People love to hoard money. I see it all the time. Some people keep tens of thousands of dollars in cash, and I've even known folks who keep physical cash under their mattresses. I see this especially with immigrant families where there's a deep distrust of the financial system, which I completely understand. But here's the brutal truth. Having this excess cash sitting around is absolutely killing your ability to compound wealth. Let me be clear about what an emergency fund should actually be. It should cover your rent or mortgage payment, your basic essential groceries. And I'm talking actual necessities here, not the Whole Foods organic everything version. Your utility bills and any minimum debt payments you have to make monthly. Add all of those up. That's 1 month of your true essential expenses. Now multiply that by 3 to 6 months. That's your emergency fund. That's the money you need if you lose your job or a real emergency happens. This is what keeps your life going until you find another source of income. Anything beyond that 3 to 6 month range, it's not efficient. It should either be deployed for investing in future wealth building, or it should be serving a specific short-term purpose, like saving for a house down payment. Wait, there's something you need to pay attention to if you don't want to miss how the wealthy think about this completely differently. There's an ancient biblical story that illustrates this perfectly. When the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness, God provided manna, food from heaven, every single day. But here's the key part. Those who gathered more than they needed for that day, trying to hoard it just in case, found that by morning it had rotted and bred worms. Only the people who gathered exactly what they needed had food that stayed fresh. The lesson? Hoarding beyond necessity doesn't bring security, it brings rot. And in modern times, that rot is called inflation. Your excess cash isn't staying fresh, it's slowly rotting away at 3 to 4% per year, losing purchasing power while you sleep. Here's your actionable step. Sit down today and honestly calculate what you actually need for an emergency fund. And I mean, be realistic here. Not, what if everything goes catastrophically wrong at once? Because that's anxiety talking, not planning. I'm talking about, if I lost my job tomorrow, what do I actually need each month to survive until I find work? Most people discover their real number is way lower than the amount they've been hoarding. Maybe it's $15,000, maybe it's $25,000, depending on your lifestyle. But it's probably not the $60,000 or $80,000 some people keep just to feel safe. Here's a story that changed how I think about this. I know a couple who kept an $80,000 emergency fund. They thought they were being responsible. Then one day they actually calculated their essential monthly expenses. Turned out they only needed $40,200 per month. Even at 6 months, that's only $25,200. They had been keeping $80,000 when they only needed $25,000. That's $55,000 sitting there doing nothing, losing value to inflation every year. They finally invested that excess $55,000. A year later, it had grown to about $65,000 from market gains. They told me, "We thought we needed that huge cushion to feel safe. Turns out real safety isn't a number in your bank account, it's a strategy." We were confusing fear with prudence. The principle here is powerful but uncomfortable. Excess cash is not abundance, it's stagnation. True financial security comes from having enough working for you in investments, not sitting idle around you gathering dust and losing value. But that's just the surface. What's behind it is what will startle people about how fast your safe money is actually disappearing. Number 4. Inflation is eating your cash alive. The fourth reason why keeping too much cash is a massive mistake, and this one should make you genuinely angry, is that inflation is eating your money alive every single day, whether you're paying attention or not. Since 2020, the money supply in America has been expanding rapidly. More dollars are being printed, flooding the system, which means each individual dollar you own is losing purchasing power. This is what we call inflation, and it's been averaging 3 to 4% annually. We even saw it spike to 8 to 9% in recent years. Let me give you a concrete example that'll make this painfully clear. If you have $50,000 sitting in your savings account today, and inflation averages just 3% per year, which is actually conservative, in 10 years, that same $50,000 will only buy what roughly $37,000 buys today. You didn't spend a penny, but you lost $13,000 in purchasing power just by letting it sit there. And you've probably felt this in your real life over the past 5 or 6 years. Let me show you some actual price changes. A Chipotle burrito in 2019 cost about $8.50. Today, that same burrito is closer to $12. The median price of a new car was $38,000 in 2019. Now it's $48,000. Even a gallon of gas went from around $2.50 to $3.20 today. Now here's where it gets really depressing. If you had $50,000 in 2019, you could have bought 5,882 Chipotle burritos. But today, that same $50,000 only buys you 4,166 burritos. You lost 716 burritos to inflation. 1,700 burritos gone just from holding cash. But that's just the surface. What's behind it is what will startle people about how your safe strategy is actually the riskiest thing you could be doing. There's an ancient story about Joseph in Egypt that perfectly illustrates the right way to think about resources. When Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dream about 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine, he didn't just say, "Store grain in barns and hope for the best." He created a strategic deployment plan. Store during abundance, then strategically deploy during scarcity. Joseph understood something crucial. Hoarding without a strategy leads to rot. He had to actively manage resources, not just pile them up and pray. But here's the modern twist nobody tells you. Keeping cash today isn't like storing grain. It's more like storing ice cubes in the desert. The longer you hold them, the smaller they get. Your cash is a melting asset, losing roughly 3 to 4% of its value every single year to inflation. The wealthy understand this, which is why they don't keep large amounts of excess cash. They put their money into assets that grow faster than inflation eats them. Stocks that historically return around 10% annually, real estate that appreciates and generates rental income, I-bonds that are specifically designed to match inflation, even commodities or other investments. Here's your actionable step. Calculate your burrito loss right now. How much cash do you have sitting idle beyond your emergency fund? Multiply that number by 3%. That's how much purchasing power you're losing this year alone. On $40,000 of excess cash, that's $1,200 annually. Over 10 years with compounding, you're looking at losing over $12,000 in purchasing power. Here's a story that brings this crushing reality home. I know a grandfather who kept $150,000 in cash in a bank account for 15 years because it made him feel secure. His grandson, who worked in finance, sat down with him one day and ran the numbers. From inflation alone, that $150,000 had lost approximately $67,000 in purchasing power. But it got worse. If he had invested that money in a simple index fund instead, he would have had an additional $80,000 in gains. Total opportunity cost? Nearly $147,000. The grandfather looked at his grandson and said, "I thought I was protecting my family's future. I didn't realize I was stealing half of it from them." The principle is brutal but true. Cash is not security. It's a melting ice cube. The longer you hold it idle, the smaller it gets. True wealth is built by deploying your resources into assets that grow, not by hoarding dollars that shrink. It sounds simple, but the hardest part is what's about to be told next. Number 5. The Dunning-Kruger Effect. The fifth and final reason why having too much cash is a mistake might be the most dangerous one of all, because this one makes you feel good while you're actually failing. I'm talking about the Dunning-Kruger Effect, and it's the reason why people with $60,000 in their savings account think they're crushing it financially while they're actually falling behind. The Dunning-Kruger Effect is a cognitive bias where people with low ability in a particular area tend to massively overestimate their skills. And here's why it's so dangerous. They don't know what they don't know, so they can't accurately gauge how badly they're actually performing. You see this play out in finance all the time. Someone makes money on one good day trade and suddenly thinks they're the next Warren Buffett. Someone closes one successful real estate deal and believes they're Grant Cardone. And someone who has $60,000 saved up thinks, "I'm doing better than most Americans." And you know what? That might actually be true when it comes to saving. But here's the brutal reality. You're doing better than they are at saving, but you're failing spectacularly at the real goal, which is wealth building. Having a lot of cash sitting around might make you feel smart and responsible, but actually being smart with money? That often means having relatively little cash in the bank, because it's all strategically deployed and working for you in investments, real estate, or other appreciating assets. Do you see anything unusual? The answer is right here. What you should be tracking isn't your bank account balance. It's your net worth and your total assets that are actually growing. There's an ancient parable that perfectly captures this blind spot. In the biblical story, a Pharisee and a tax collector both went to pray. The Pharisee stood up and prayed, "God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers. I fast twice a week and give a tenth of all I get." Meanwhile, the tax collector simply prayed, "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." Jesus said the tax collector went home justified, not the Pharisee. Why? Because the Pharisee's self-congratulation made him completely blind to what he was missing. He thought his visible actions meant he was righteous, but he was actually just proud and disconnected from reality. The same thing happens with cash hoarders. They look at their savings account balance and think, "I'm responsible, I'm doing well." But they're missing the entire point. They're not building wealth, they're just storing value that's slowly dying. Here's your actionable step. Calculate your actual net worth today. Take all your assets, investments, retirement accounts, home equity if you own property, and subtract all your liabilities like debts and loans. That's your real net worth. Then ask yourself, what percentage of my net worth is sitting in cash versus actually invested and growing? If more than 10 to 15% of your net worth is in cash, beyond your emergency fund and short-term goals, you're not building wealth efficiently. You're hoarding. Here's a story that illustrates this perfectly. I know a man who proudly told his friends he had $100,000 in savings at age 50. He felt accomplished, successful, and ahead of the game. Then one of his friends asked a simple question. "That's great, but what's your total net worth?" He went home and calculated it. $100,000 in cash, $30,000 in retirement accounts, and a $50,000 car that was depreciating. Total net worth, $180,000. Meanwhile, his friend, the same age, had only $20,000 in cash, but $500,000 in investments and retirement accounts. Net worth, $520,000. The first man told me later, "I was so proud of my savings that I completely missed the point. I'm not wealthy. I'm just really good at storing money that's dying. My friend with less cash is almost 3 times wealthier than I because his money has been working while mine has been sitting." The principle here is powerful. Financial success isn't measured by what you've saved. It's measured by what you've built. Cash is a tool, not a trophy. Stop celebrating how much you've stored and start celebrating how much you've grown. All of the above will be meaningless if you miss the last detail about exactly how much you should actually keep in your bank. So there you have it. 5 reasons why keeping too much cash is costing you a fortune. The spending temptation that makes you waste money, the massive opportunity cost of idle cash not working for you, the illusion that you need more than you actually do, inflation eating 3 to 4% annually, and the false confidence that blinds you to real wealth building. Here's the bottom line. The right amount to keep in your bank. Your emergency fund of 3 to 6 months, essential expenses, plus any short-term savings goals you need within 5 years. For most people, that's between $15,000 and $40,000 total. Everything beyond that, it should be in high-yield savings at a minimum earning 3.5%, or better yet, invested in assets that actually grow. Comment "cash trap" right now if you just realized you've been keeping way too much in the bank. This might be the wake-up call that changes your financial trajectory. Take action today. Calculate your real emergency fund need, open separate accounts for different goals, and start deploying that excess cash. Your bank balance isn't your scorecard, your net worth is. Stop storing wealth that's dying. Start building wealth that's growing.